South African breweries want government to cut excise duties for small and medium-sized businesses in the beer industry. The company is claiming that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused more than 150,000 job losses in that sector, with the beer value chain and South Africa's craft breweries shrinking by about 30% since 2020. Now, bans on the sale of alcohol at the start of the pandemic were imposed to keep hospitals clear of alcohol-related trauma cases. SAB is of the view that there must be a deliberate intention, at least by government, to resuscitate the economy through providing some kind of tax relief for medium and small brewers. For more on this, let's bring in Fatsani Banda, who's the company's economist. It's great to have you on the program, and thanks very much indeed for making time. I mean, how do we envision this taking place in a context where we spend so much time speaking about the country's shrinking fiscus? Do you think there's an appetite from government to give you this kind of reprieve?
Thanks for having me, Ayanda, and thanks to your viewers for watching. I think in the context of a budget, it's always a difficult balancing act, and we acknowledge this for National Treasury. On the one side, we have this long-going, persistent economic growth story with a high unemployment rate. And on the other side, you have the national treasurers having to balance the budget, having to think about debt sustainability and trying to overall give us a good fiscus whilst also trying to give our economy a chance to grow. So we're trying to put forward on the table what has always been an ongoing conversation, that economic growth is important, and given the pandemic, economic recovery is important. And we don't want to underemphasize this, because the multiplier effects that come from economic growth are 5 or 6 times greater than, for instance, increasing taxes or increasing just the expenditure on the budget. And that's what we put on the table from National Treasury, was our ask for a tax break or economic tax relief through excise duties for our micro, small and medium brewers across our value chain.
And how would this take place? I mean, is it just a tax relief in the form of reduced taxes, or a tax break in the form of not having taxes at all for a certain period of time? Help us better understand the nature of the kind of relief that you're asking for.
Look, and in place is a tax policy for excise, and we understand why excise exists, and we are in agreement that the principle should remain that the industry should contribute to taxes. But if we're going to talk about the pressure that excise tax continues to play on the growth of the beer industry, then we really need to rethink what we're doing, or what Treasury is, the underlying reasons behind the increase in excise. So last year, Ayanda, we had an 8% excise adjustment, which was double inflation. And we're saying that didn't help us. We were still deep in the pandemic. We were under uncertain times. And we're trying to say, if a bottle of beer will have an average cost of excise amounting to 40%, that gives little room for small and medium businesses to grow. That gives very little room for them to recover. And we're saying include us in the recovery story. We don't want to be isolated. We agree that there should be multiple government interventions to help that process, but don't exclude us from that process. One of the big significant costs for brewers in particular are the high excise taxes, which haven't been rethought, which haven't had a recent development or change in the framework over the last 7 years. So we're really confronting this big question as to whether excise taxes will be such a high cost, and will it ever give us the reprieve we need, in particular in this pandemic, that allows us the room to grow.
Yeah. Are you able to help us better understand the scale of the economic fallout of COVID-19, specifically within the industry? And I'm asking this because I'm trying to gauge how far this kind of relief would go in helping the industry get back essentially to some kind of pre-pandemic level of operation.
Look, I mean, the scale is obviously dependent on running costs and volumes. But our approach was to say big companies obviously have the buffers to protect their businesses. And as you mentioned initially, when you mentioned the stats of the small and micro brewers, in the first year, we saw them decimated. We saw our first black female microbrewer leave the industry, so they don't have the sorts of buffers to protect them. And that's sort of the argument we're going with. We're saying the running costs to have buffers for things such as pandemics, for things such as high tax costs through excise, are not there for small and medium and micro brewers. And we're saying economic tax relief in the form of excise is one of the big contributing factors that can give them the space, the room to really rethink entering back. And we would like to see our 30% come back, quite honestly, Ayanda. We would like to see them be part of the value chain. Without them, our value chain doesn't move as smoothly. And it's really an appeal to say, look, we know that they don't have the buffers in place to protect their business, but what is the government doing, and are we being excluded? And is tax relief significant enough? We know that excise is about 40% of the running costs and volumes for every brewery, and we're saying that's high, and small and medium brewers don't have the capacity to not have some sort of support to get back into doing business.
Yeah, of course, this will ultimately be government's prerogative, but I can already hear the naysayers suggesting that why should the breweries industry be treated exceptionally in a context where the economic fallout has affected everyone? I'm sure you're anticipating that question. What's your response to that?
I mean, we're not saying that we should be treated exceptionally. We're not trying to be an outlier in the discussion. We're trying to be included in the discussion. So the government does have an economic reconstruction and recovery plan in place. It's been communicated. We're well aware of it. The Department of Trade and Industry has master plans to encourage the manufacturing industry to keep growing because of the multipliers they create. So we're actually trying to be included in the conversation. We're not trying to be an exception to the rule, as it were, and we're not trying to not play a part in paying taxes. We are very tax compliant. We believe in tax compliance, but we're trying to see what's going on in the world, and we're trying to say, look, the whole world is in a space where recovery is really important. And we've seen, for instance, in African countries and even in developed countries, the government saying we value the job creation that breweries have done. We value the multipliers that they create, and we really see the effects of a tax relief that it may have on the industry. And they've put in effect 0% increases for 3 years in the making. And that's to say they recognize that tax inputs are very important, but the multiplier effects of having an industry that has very high job multipliers continue to be in operation. And with our unemployment, we can't afford to leave anybody out of the story. And we're saying, let us be part of the story, and let us continue to do that as an industry that really prides ourselves in having a value chain with high livelihoods participation.
Well, Fatsani Banda, all the best with your quest. I imagine whatever the minister has to say, we'll all find out when that budget speech is delivered later this month. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Fatsani Banda is an economist with the South African Breweries.